people from SMG left, Milos Mrdakovic, will give us an introduction to the Fediverse.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Milos Mrdakovic. I am a software engineer here working at TX Services. I'm also a proponent of decentralized networks. So previously I was working with decentralized networks in the financial industry, but I've been also following the decentralized networks in the media. And in a sense, we are all working here on the largest decentralized network called the internet. So the decentralized network that I want to talk about today is called the Fediverse. It is a decentralized social network. And you can see an interesting thing at the bottom of this slide. There is this address, which looks a lot like an email address, but it's not an email address. This is a Fediverse ID. So basically, this is something like an username on Twitter or Facebook. We will see later how it works. Just a note, Fediverse is a universally accepted term in the community for this network, but also if you run into terms such as the social web or Mastodon compatible or ActivityPub compatible, this basically means the same. So before we dive into the Fediverse, we need to look into the popular social networks today. So we use social networks to stay up to date with what others are doing, to communicate with others, but they are flawed by design. There are multiple issues with them, but the main one I want to focus on here is centralization. So most platforms, most social networks today are owned by a single entity, by a company whose main interest is naturally revenue. So to maximize revenue, they apply various strategies, such as advertisements, paywalls, limited and expensive APIs, and algorithms which amplify content so that you get, so that they get your attention for as long as possible. So user doesn't really have a choice when it comes to these features of the social network. That's why they are called closed systems. All operations in the system are controlled by the system operator, and this type of system, the closed systems, are also known as the walled garden. So we have a nice illustration here where we see some social networks. Some of them are really interesting ones. It's dated back, it was published in 2008, but nevertheless, it's still very significant today, I think. So we all remember MySpace. That was at some point the most popular social network, which basically disappeared with all user data. At the top right, we have Orkut, which is, some of you might have heard of it, some maybe not. It is owned by Google. It was very popular in some countries. It also disappeared after some time. We have Twitter, for example. It's owned by the world's richest man. Now it's still running, but there are recent controversies surrounding it. So we cannot say it's at its peak of popularity. So LinkedIn, still running. It's owned by Microsoft. And Facebook, still running, owned by Meta. So yeah, before I go there. So yeah, we said these are walled gardens. You see a pattern here. All of these social networks are owned by tech giants. Probably ask yourself why? Because walled gardens, because closed systems are very profitable businesses. They are in a business of attention and personal data, and that's very lucrative. There's abundance of it, so it keeps them running. But businesses sometimes fail, and when a platform disappears, your social network is gone, basically. So because they're closed systems, you cannot export your connections and migrate them to a new platform, of course. Maybe you can export some data, but it's pretty much useless because it's only native to that platform. So yeah, the alternative to closed system is an open ecosystem such as the Fediverse. So what's also common about these popular social networks, for example, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, it's that they are all created more than 10 or 15 years ago. Back then, the hardware was very expensive and the developer resources were limited. But over the years, the hardware became cheaper, the technology advances, and we've seen increased developer resources. So we also see an increasing number of smaller social networks which appeared. They are here represented with the smaller networks are represented by small dots with various colors. Still, in this context, of course, they don't matter so much. They're small, they're insignificant. They are usually hosted by communities for their members. They had a small user base. But something happened in 2018. In 2018, the ActivityPub protocol is presented. Um, ActivityPub is a common language for social media so that they can speak to each other. Most of these small social networks implemented it. So they became connected. They could speak to each other and they formed a network. Suddenly you see it's a bit more significant in this context. Still not, it didn't attract many users, but still it's better. So it's a decentralized network basically. Let's imagine if our current social system was decentralized, like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, for example. Maybe a friend of mine will post something on Instagram, and I would be able to see that post on Twitter, and I would be also able to like that post, to comment on that post, and a friend of mine would see that on Instagram as a native, as if we are on the same platform. As I'm not using the Twitter, but I'm also on Instagram. It wouldn't matter because they would be able to. These two platforms would be able to speak to each other, or maybe I would be able to read a tweet on LinkedIn or watch a YouTube video on TikTok. Basically, of course, it's not the case. They are closed systems. They care for your attention. They don't want you to give away your attention to someone else. It's about the revenue, right? So this decentralized system that was formed with the introduction of the common language with the protocol is what we call the Fediverse, which is short for the federated universe. Basically, what federated means is that they talk to each other. This is a bit more realistic illustration of the Fediverse. Here we see a network of various platforms which talk to each other. And instead of the dots, we actually see the logos of some of these platforms. Some of them maybe look familiar to you, most of them probably not. But you probably have noticed there is WordPress. So WordPress is the largest blogging platform out there, which is really significant. The other ones, like the blue one, is Mastodon, the PixelFed, PeerTube. We will see later about them. But basically, this is the representation of the Fediverse. Social networking platforms who talk to one to another. So we said everything changed with the introduction of this common language, this protocol. So what are protocols? Protocols are very important for computer systems. What for human is language, for computers it is a protocol. So there are various protocols out there for various use cases. For example, when you visit a website, you use a hypertext transfer protocol or HTTP. It's basically the rules that web browsers and web servers uh, comply to so that they serve you the requested page. We also have, for example, email protocols. It's the rules that email clients and email servers follow so that you're able to send email. And because they are protocols, you can basically use any client, right? You're not limited to one single platform. In the case of the surfing the web, you have like you can choose whichever browser you want to use, right? You can use Chrome, you can use Firefox, or any other. For email, there's hundreds of email clients. They all basically speak the same protocol, so you can use any one of them. But what about the social media? Is there a protocol for social media? And that's what we said is the activity pub. So activity pub is a social networking protocol, this common language that social networking websites use, and so that they can talk to each other. Presented in 2018, and it's the most widely used protocol in the Fediverse. It's not the only one. There have been also protocols prior to ActivityPub, but they were not like so widely spread. Why is this one significant? Because it was introduced by the International Standard Organization, or W3C, which is very respected. They have authored some of the most widely used technologies on the internet, like XML, DOM, and similar. So here we have an image from the ActivityPub standard document. Basically, we will not go into too much details. Basically, ActivityPub just describes how user can send and receive content. Everything else is for the app, for the network which implements it to handle, like storing the content and similar. So basically, you can see there is user on the left, there is inbox and outbox. This looks very similar to email. You post content to outbox. To outbox, it goes to the rest of the world. The rest of the world posts content to your inbox. You can retrieve that and look at that content. Um, yeah, and this is basically implemented. These are basically just two endpoints on your server, and it just defines the content, how the object that the endpoints receive should look like, the data object. So yes, talking about the Fediverse, we mentioned multiple platforms which are in the network. The most popular platform is called Mastodon. Mastodon is a social network which implements ActivityPub. It's older than ActivityPub. They implemented it as soon as it came out, so it became federated. The most popular one, it's very similar to Twitter. A lot of Twitter users have migrated to Mastodon. Actually, it's also it's based on open source software, so you can host your own instance if you have a server, or there are also hosting providers out there which you can use, pay, and you get your own instance. Because it's the most popular one, there are so many instances out there. Many of them are public, so you can go there and register your account and be able to communicate in the Fediverse. Because it's so popular, it's pretty much the way most of us got introduced to the Fediverse. On the image there, you see an official Mastodon app. There you can see join Mastodon.social. Mastodon.social is their official instance, but there's so many of them out there that you can select. Also, it's not the only app because everything is based on the protocol. There are also other third-party apps that with more or less features that you can use instead of the official one. Okay, so this is an overview of all the platforms that we have available. Most of the platforms, at least the most popular ones that we have available, which speak this ActivityPub protocol and which are members of the Fediverse. So they are divided in groups. We have multimedia, we have networking, music, books, events. All of them, they form the Fediverse. We have already mentioned Mastodon over there in the networking at the top, but it's not the only one. There are so many of them. For example, Lemmy, that's a social network which is more similar to Reddit, for example. So if you want Reddit experience, you would go and use that one. In multimedia, we have also very interesting ones. For example, PeerTube, which is basically a federated YouTube. PixelFed, which is basically a clone of Instagram, a federated Instagram with almost exactly the same experience, and it's getting really popular as well. Nextcloud, some of you may have heard of it. It's very popular self-hosted software out there, which has ActivityPub integration. And yeah, the others. For example, in the writing, we already mentioned the WordPress via the official plugin. Yeah, about the adoption. So definitely there are more and more users who are joining the Fediverse. Especially a lot of users who have migrated from Twitter to Mastodon because of the recent controversies, but also from Reddit to, for example, Lemmy, because of the recent changes in the terms of use and privacy policy and similar. But still, it is insignificant. It's very small user base comparing to the popular social media. But this is changing fast. We'll probably see more and more users as the popular platforms, the big companies start joining the Fediverse. So, for example, we have a few interesting entities who decided to host their own Mastodon instance. We have Medium.com, which has its own Mastodon instance, which only Medium.com users can register, but basically it allows them to federate with the other social networks. They're not anymore contained in the Medium. We have Switzerland government actually, who hosts its own instance since like a month ago, and there you can see their officials communicating with the public, publishing updates, what are they working on, and similar. That's very interesting experiment. But WordPress, we already mentioned, has ActivityPub integration available. It's not enabled by default, but it's an official plugin that they are developing, that they're released, that you can use to turn your website, your blog, into a federated website. So you can talk with all the other platforms. What does it mean? So, for example, if you have a blog and you publish a post, if someone, and you have this integration enabled, right? So someone on Mastodon or Lemmy or any other platform which is part of the Fediverse can actually follow your blog on their platform. Anything you post would appear in their feed, which is great. If they see your post, if they like it, if they put a comment, that comment will appear on your blog as if it was done on the WordPress, as if a native feature. But even more interesting is the planned ActivityPub integrations. The really important one is Threads. It's Meta's Threads. It's also basically a Twitter copy, but this one is being developed by the largest IT company, probably the Meta behind Facebook. So in their official documentation, they say they plan to enable federation for threads. So this is a huge, I don't know how many users threads have, probably like a couple hundred millions or something, but potentially the whole Instagram is also equal threads. So it means all these users are actually entering the Fediverse, and that's probably going to happen soon. Another interesting one is GitLab. It's a software development software that we use in our company. Also, they plan to do Fediverse ActivityPub integration. So, for example, companies who care about their data, they host their own GitLab instance, and suddenly these different instances can communicate with each other. So, if I'm on our instance of SMG, for example, I can comment and publish merge request to instance of some different entity hosted on their own server without creating account on their own instance, which is amazing. Of course, there are some also drawbacks of this system of the Fediverse. There's a lot probably that you've heard today, and it doesn't seem so simple. And that's the largest like problem for the newcomers to to onboard. For example, we have all these instances. You register your profile of any of these instances, but if that instance goes down, your profile is gone. So still, this is not completely decentralized. It is federated. This is partly decentralized. You can migrate your account to another instance in this case, but still, this is not perfect, right? Fediverse is not the only decentralized social network. Nostr, which is acronym for nodes transmitted over relays, is another social networking protocol. It is quite new, and I am very excited about this one. So we've talked about the centralized social networks. We've talked about the federated ones, or the partially decentralized. And this one is fully decentralized. Why? There are nodes which are equal to servers, but they don't communicate to each other. Basically, they just accept and hold the data, and everything else is offloaded to the client. But why are they fully decentralized? If any of the node that you're publishing your content to fails, you still have your identity. It's not hosted on any node or anything. And that's thanks to the public key cryptography. So I won't go into details, but basically public key cryptography, you have a public and private key, and you can use them to sign your content, publish them over to the network. You keep your private key safe. You don't share it with anyone, and as long it's safe, as long as only you have control over it, it's safe, and that is your identity basically. There are also open protocol. There are also many third-party apps that you can use. There is no such thing as an official app. It's just a protocol. Probably the most famous one is here on the image. It's called Damus. I think it's iOS app, and it has a really nice experience. But basically, there are clients being developed for all platforms at the moment. So yeah. So to sum it up, everything we have popular social media, which is kind of a closed system, logged in, applying various strategies to keep you there as long as possible. And they're more acting like parasocial. What does it mean? It's like unidirectional communication. They're more tailored nowadays for influencers and, companies and people who want to reach large audience, and not so much anymore for people to socialize, to communicate to each other. So what is the alternative to this closed system is a decentralized social media, right? The open ecosystem. The decentralized social media is enabled by social networking protocols. We mentioned ActivityPub, which powers the Fediverse, and we also mentioned Nostr. So, yeah, that's basically it. Thank you very much for listening.